Recognize the member for Essex.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity, the impromptu opportunity to have been given today an opportunity to address this very important piece of legislation, which on the face of it seems to be, something like just a housekeeping bill, but is actually a very intelligent move on the part of the PC government to centralize decision-making authority for many real estate transactions that occur within the government. And I was lucky, Madam Speaker, because prior to being given the opportunity to address this matter today, I had the benefit of hearing all of the comments made by various other members of this chamber, including the member from Scarborough Rouge Park and the member from Brampton West and the member from Oshawa, who gave a very brave one-hour dissertation regarding this bill, and the member from London North Centre. And another member of this House, a member from Peterborough Kawartha, made the observation with regard to one of the items being treated in this bill, that is the Environmental Assessment Act, and he made the statement that it is in fact a very old piece of legislation. And without revealing exactly the date I was born, it's my conjecture that this Environmental Assessment Act is actually older than I am and hasn't been amended since. Now, I'm of the opinion that things that are old aren't necessarily bad. In fact, they might be quite good. But it's not a bad idea to look at these things every once in a while and decide whether or not that which is old can be dusted off a bit and improved. And as a matter of reflecting on that particular act and the experience that people have had with that act, I can inform the other members of this Assembly that once upon a time, in the not too far distant past, I used to serve on a municipal council. When I was first elected in the year 2000, I served as a councillor from 2000 to 2003, and then I served as elected as deputy mayor from 2004 to 2006. And having served as a member of an elected council, I had the opportunity to learn up front and close and personal on how environmental assessments are done at the municipal level. Now I'm going to describe the environmental assessment at the municipal level, and it's going to be a simple description. It's not going to be 100% reflective of what the legislation says, but I'm just going to give a simple explanation of it. So if a municipality is going through an environmental assessment, the first thing they might do is tender the contract. So they have to put it out for tender, which means they advertise, people bid on it, and then they have a meeting and they select somebody to do the environmental assessment and pay them for doing that. That's the first step. Maybe that takes some months. Then they issue public notices. So notices are put in newspapers, maybe they're put online. You might see one at Town Hall. And the public notice might say that consultations have begun. And then there's an interim report to the municipal council, and the interim report might report on what has been done so far, what kind of consultations have happened, and the municipal report might also propose what the project might look like and provide various alternative projects. And then the party conducting the environmental assessment will make a recommendation. It'll be the preferred option. That'll be put before a municipal council to be considered. And when it goes to the municipal council, it'll be a public meeting, and that, Madam Speaker, that's when the NIMBYs come out, not in my backyard. And everybody comes out and they say, I don't want this built in my backyard. And then the municipal council deliberates on it and hums and haws, and if they're intimidated, they might turn it down. If they're intimidated by the NIMBYs, they'll turn it down. Or they might vote on it and pass it. Or they might say, let's defer this for more information from administration. And all that time is going by, Madam Speaker. Time is going by, and it's going by, and it's going by. And then finally a decision gets made. A municipal council finally votes and approves a project. Sometimes these processes take months, sometimes years, and that's not unusual. It's actually quite typical. And then after the decision is made, there's a 30-day period. Now, after hearing that very simplistic description of the EA process, of the environmental assessment process, you might naturally ask this question. After all that time, do we really need another 30-day period of nothing happening? You might ask that question. And I think the MPP for St. Catharines touched on it a bit, and I want to be fair to the MPP from St. Catharines. I don't want to try to exactly quote what she said, but the MPP said something along the lines of, in some situations, that 30-day period might not be necessary. And that's exactly what this Act says. In not the same language, but in colloquial language, that's what it says. In some situations, that 30-day period is not necessary. So why not just let the minister move things along and avoid the 30-day delay, which, as we've seen in my brief and very simplistic description of the EA process, might actually add cost if you add those 30 days. You might save some money if you go past, if you process or bypass those 30 days. A municipal council might save some money. It's also true, as the member from Renfrew stated earlier, that if you allow that 30 days to be truncated, you will allow to start the project earlier, thus avoiding winter weather. And as we all know, there are two seasons in Ontario, winter and construction. That's what we all say. So there could be very, very positive result in allowing the minister to truncate those 30 days and giving permission to a municipal council to proceed with the project that's been considered. Because as we all know, or at least those of us who have served in the municipal field or done this type of work before, the process is already very long and there's lots of public consultation. You can be consulted online, you can submit your consultation online, you can go to the public meeting in person, and you can deliver your comments in person. You can write them down and send them in a letter to your municipal council. You can send them in an email. There is lots of opportunity for public consultation. To add the extra 30 days really is not necessary in most situations, particularly when you're talking about a very simple municipal project, which might involve something very simple like building a road or something of that nature. Now, it might not even be 30 days, it might be longer than that. Now, with respect to how this might operate in the event this legislation gets passed, I think what we need to do first is perhaps take a look at how things are operating right now. I'm sure there are many of members of this House, there's 124 of us, who probably were not aware before, but we're aware now because the Minister of Infrastructure has made us aware, and I thank the Minister for making us aware, that there are actually at present at least 14 entities that manage real estate here under the government of the province of Ontario. I will admit, I'll be frank with this assembly, I did not know that there were at least 14 entities that managed real estate for the government of Ontario. I imagine there could be more. Maybe the Minister of Infrastructure will be providing another report at some time in the future. And maybe we'll learn that too. But here, let's take a look at this list of the 14 entities in the province of Ontario that currently manage real estate for the Government of Ontario. Here we go. Agricorp, Education Quality and Accountability Office. I would have thought that they would have managed education and accountability. I didn't know they were managing real estate. Province of Ontario Council for the Arts, also known as the Ontario Arts Council. Ontario Media Development Corporation, also known as Ontario Creates. Ontario Trillium Foundation. Ontario Financing Authority. Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council. Ontario Tourism Marketing Partnership Corporation, also known as Destination Ontario. Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. Ontario Securities Commission. Here's one I think everybody will find interesting: Human Rights Legal Support Centre. Now, I come from the legal field. I would imagine that the Human Rights Legal Support Centre would have been working on human rights and perhaps giving people advice in the court system, or maybe even giving people advice in front of the Human Rights Tribunal. But apparently the Human Rights Legal Support Centre also manages real estate. Intellectual Property Ontario, Skilled Trades Ontario, Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario. Now that's a lot of organizations. I'm sure they're doing their best managing the real estate that's under their authority and control. I have no reason to think otherwise, that they're not doing or trying their best. I think we all do. But that means, Madam Speaker, that means that we actually have 14 different agencies managing real estate for the government of the province of Ontario, some of which clearly, after reading that list, we will all agree, all 124 of us, I suspect, will agree without any hesitation that the primary function of those organizations really is not to manage real estate, that they have a different function, which is their primary function. But somehow they've acquired the additional or secondary function of having to manage real estate. Now, it's always a good thing, and I'm going to pay some homage here to someone out of history that I have a great deal of respect for. It's a great thing if you can concentrate on one thing you do really well. If you do one thing really well, you can maximize efficiency, do it better than anybody else, produce faster than anybody else, make decisions faster than anybody else, maximize all sorts of great consequences when you can do one thing really well and be allowed to do that one thing really well. Take, for example, let's talk about an artist. Let's pick a painter. If a painter is allowed just to paint, the painter doesn't have to worry about managing real estate, doesn't have to worry about managing the finances, doesn't have to worry about making dinner. If the painter can concentrate on one thing and do it really well, that painter will probably become a great painter, because the painter's not diverting their efforts or their expertise trying to do things at which the painter is not too good. I would imagine that these 14 organizations may have the same point of view. Those 14 organizations, as I said earlier, have a different mandate, a different primary mandate. Their primary mandate is not to manage real estate. No, it is not. The primary mandate of the Human Rights Legal Support Centre is not to manage real estate. That's not their primary mandate. I would venture to guess that the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council They have a primary mandate, and I would venture to guess that the management of real estate is not their primary mandate. So it might, in fact, be very useful to allow these organizations not to have to manage real estate, but to turn that concern over to a central agency, which is exactly what this bill proposes to do, and allow them to concentrate on their primary mandate and to have an organization whose primary mandate is to manage real estate. All that seems very logical and simple, or at least it appears to be logical and simple to me. And I think the Minister of Infrastructure clearly in her statements this morning made it very clear and logical and simple to this Assembly as to why these steps have to be taken or should be taken and should form part of the consideration of this Assembly. And so I had the opportunity to listen to the remarks made by others in this chamber. Some people had some concerns. Some people raised the question of whether or not they had a certain amount of confidence with regard to how things were going to work out if this legislation were passed. And the answer to that is, you'll get to see the results. You will get to see the results. And what do we say? What do we say, those of us who support this proposed legislation? Well, we say, having 14 organizations all trying to do the same thing, which are not under their primary mandate, is probably not saving taxpayer money. Probably not. But having an organization that takes care of all that real estate and who's able to make those kind of decisions, that is to say the decisions with regard to the management of real estate, that's probably going to save taxpayer money. Now here's the choice before us. Here's the choice. The choice number one is do nothing. As I have always said throughout my 24-year law career to my clients, your first choice is do nothing. If you do nothing, you will have what you have now. Under the present proposed legislation, you have a second choice. Here's your second choice. Do something. And the something proposed under this legislation is to create a consolidated authority which will manage real estate, which presents a possibility that does not exist under the previous choice. Under the previous choice, do nothing means you save no more money. That's the consequence. It is undisputable. Under the second option, do something, you are presented with, I will say the probability, others might say merely the possibility, of saving money. So given the choice between doing nothing and gaining nothing, or doing something and possibly or probably gaining something, what is the logical choice? I shouldn't have to answer that question, but because I want to complete the logical connection, I will answer that question. The logical choice, Madam Speaker, is option number 2, do something. And that is what the Reducing Inefficiencies Act does. It proposes to create a body which, at the end of the day, the goal is to save money, save taxpayer money. And wouldn't that be a nice thing for us to do for the taxpayers of the province of Ontario? And so that, Madam Speaker, is why I will be very happily voting in favour of this proposed legislation. Thank you very much.